What if there was a world that should never have been created, but somehow, you've already been there without realizing it? Think about it for a second. Have you ever had that strange feeling that something was out of place, even without being able to explain exactly what, as if reality had failed for a moment? Like a small glitch that your mind tried to ignore, an object that seemed to be somewhere else, a conversation you swore you'd already had, or even that déjà vu that lasts too long, as if time had broken just for you. Have you ever experienced that? Now imagine if this wasn't just an impression. What if these moments were, in fact, small leaks from a world that shouldn't exist, a place where the rules we know simply don't work, where time doesn't follow a straight line, where past, present, and future mix, repeat, and contradict each other, a world made of paradoxes, where each answer creates even more questions, and each attempt to understand only plunges you deeper into the mystery. The most disturbing thing is that this kind of idea isn't just fiction. Concepts like fragmented time, overlapping realities, and flaws in perception have already been discussed by scientists, philosophers, and even artists trying to represent the inexplicable. But here's the detail that nobody likes to admit. What if our reality isn't as stable as it seems? What if what you call normal is just one version, one layer, among many others? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you, and perhaps even change the way you see everything around you. Imagine waking up in a place where everything seems normal at first glance. But, little by little, small errors begin to appear. A clock that runs backward. People who repeat the exact same actions, as if trapped in an invisible loop. Shadows that don't match the bodies. And the more you try to understand, the more reality seems to distort, as if trying to hide something. This is the kind of world that shouldn't exist. A world where glitches aren't technical flaws, but part of the system itself. Where time not only breaks, it bends, restarts, overlaps. Where you can find versions of yourself at different times, and none of them seem to know what's really going on. And the strangest thing of all is the feeling of familiarity, as if, deep down, you've seen it before, as if this impossible world weren't entirely unknown, as if it were closer than it should be. Perhaps the most unsettling thing isn't the existence of this place, but the fact that we might not realize when we're inside it. Because if reality can fail, if time can break, if paradoxes can exist, then how can you be sure this has never happened to you? Pay attention, because from now on we're going to start putting the pieces of this puzzle together, and the deeper we go, the harder it will be to separate what's real from what should never have existed. And perhaps that's exactly why this type of story affects us so much, because, deep down, it doesn't seem completely impossible. There's always that detail, that small flaw, that strange moment that we try to forget, but that remains there, in the back of our minds, like an echo that won't disappear. And I want to know from you, really, have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever felt that time stopped for a moment, or that reality simply didn't make sense? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far, because these experiences, however subtle they may seem, can tell us much more than we imagine. And it's not just about sharing for the sake of sharing. When you comment, you end up helping to build something bigger here. Other people read, identify with it, and begin to notice patterns they may never have noticed before. It's as if, together, we begin to map this strange world that seems to exist in the subtext of reality. If you're enjoying this type of content, please leave a like. It may seem simple, but it makes a huge difference. It shows that this type of narrative, deeper and more mysterious, deserves to continue existing and reaching more people. And if you want to continue exploring these themes, paradoxes, broken time, glitches of reality, and everything that challenges what we believe to be real, subscribe to the channel, because there's still a lot we'll discover together. And the more people here, the further we can go. Your participation here isn't just a click. It literally helps this type of content grow, reaching other people who might also be trying to understand those little flaws that nobody explains. Now, pay attention to what comes next, because the deeper we delve into this world that shouldn't exist, the more the rules begin to disappear. And it's precisely at this point that things get really disturbing. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because understanding this world that shouldn't exist isn't just about imagining something strange. It's about perceiving the signs that have always been there, hidden behind the scenes of our own perception. The truth is that we've been conditioned to believe that reality is stable, predictable, almost immutable. But what if that's just a construct of our minds to avoid chaos? Think about the number of decisions you make every day, without questioning, trusting that time follows a logical order, that what came before comes after. But in this other scenario, that simply doesn't exist. The sequence breaks, the logic dissolves, and what remains is a kind of fragmented reality, where each choice can generate different versions of the same moment. This isn't just an abstract idea. It's a possibility that completely changes how we perceive our own journey. And that's where the most unsettling part comes in. Because perhaps this world isn't separate from ours. Perhaps it's a layer, a subtle distortion, a hidden truth that appears in small details, those that we usually ignore. An inexplicable delay, a feeling of repetition, a thought that seems not to have come from you. Small signs that, in isolation, mean nothing. But together, they begin to form a pattern. And when you start to notice this pattern, something changes in your mindset. You stop seeing reality as something fixed and begin to see it as something in constant transformation, almost like a system that can fail. And if it can fail, then it can reveal things that should never be seen. Perhaps the greatest impact of all this isn't fear, but doubt, because the moment you question what is real, you also begin to question who you are within all of this. And that's a journey not everyone is prepared to take. But if, somehow, this makes sense to you, then maybe you've already realized more than you think. Comment below. Does this make sense to you? Me? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's precisely at the first sign that something is wrong that everything really starts to change. It's not something obvious. It's not a big or impossible event. On the contrary, it's subtle, almost imperceptible, a detail out of place, a small break in logic that passes by too quickly for most people to notice. It could be an object you're sure you left in one place, but it turns up in another, or a memory that seems clear, but when you try to reconstruct it, something doesn't fit, as if parts of your own memory had been edited, rearranged, without your consent. And at that moment, the mind tries to protect you, creating simple explanations, maintaining a sense of control. But, deep down, that doubt remains. That strange feeling that something isn't right. This is the real turning point, because it's not just about what happened, it's about the impact it has on your perception. From then on, your decisions begin to change. Your way of seeing the world transforms, even if you don't realize it immediately. You start paying more attention, questioning more, looking for patterns where before there was only routine. And it is precisely in these behind-the-scenes aspects of reality that the most important things happen. Small flaws, minor delays, subtle repetitions. As if the world were trying to correct itself, but couldn't do it perfectly. As if there were an invisible force rearranging everything in real time, and failing to hide the errors. What's most intriguing is that the more you notice these signs, the more they seem to appear. As if reality itself were responding to your attention. And this raises an uncomfortable question. Were these errors always there? Or did they start to appear when you began to notice them? Because if perception changes, experience, then perhaps the hidden truth isn't in the world out there, but in how you perceive what's happening. And from that point on, ignoring those signs ceases to be an option. Now, think honestly. Has this ever happened to you in any way? Comment below. I've noticed this, so now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when time begins to break down, the feeling stops being merely strange and becomes truly unsettling. It's no longer just a detail out of place. It's as if the very sequence of events begins to lose its meaning. You experience something, and seconds later, you have the impression that it has already happened. Or worse, you remember something that hasn't happened yet, as if you were accessing a fragment out of order. This completely changes your mindset, because the basis of everything you understand as reality depends on time being linear, past, present, and future, a clear line. But when that line begins to distort, your perception becomes conflicted. And it is at this point that loops emerge, almost identical repetitions, moments that seem to restart with slight variations, as if they were alternative versions trying to adjust. And perhaps the most disturbing thing isn't the phenomenon itself, but the naturalness with which it can happen. Without warning, without explanation, in the background of your routine, you continue making decisions, following your journey, thinking everything is under control. But, at the same time, something invisible may be rearranging these moments. Testing paths, creating micro-variations that you barely notice. This raises a possibility that changes everything. What if time isn't a line, but a set of overlapping layers? What if each choice opens up small branches that continue to exist, even if you only perceive one of them? In this scenario, mistakes wouldn't be flaws, but revelations that other versions are happening simultaneously. The impact of this is profound, because it places you at the center of something much larger. Your decisions cease to be simple choices and become points of connection between different possible realities. And perhaps those moments of confusion, repetition, or anticipation are merely echoes of these other layers trying to emerge. And the more you think about it, the harder it becomes to ignore the feeling that something is constantly adjusting around you. As if time were trying to correct itself, but never perfectly. Tell me something. Have you ever felt like a moment was repeating itself, almost identically, but not quite? Comment below. Time failed me. Enough. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when glitches in reality start to appear, it's impossible to ignore them anymore. It's not just a feeling or an isolated detail. It's as if the system itself begins to show visible flaws. Small freezes in the world around you. People who seem to repeat the exact same movement, at the same rhythm, as if they were trapped in an invisible pattern. Sounds that cut off abruptly. Images that seem to blink for a second, revealing something that shouldn't be there. And the strangest thing is that these glitches don't come with a warning. They appear in the middle of your routine, at the most ordinary moments, almost as if they were hidden in the background of reality, waiting for an opening to appear. And when they appear, they leave a mark. A doubt that's hard to erase, because it's not just about seeing something strange, it's about feeling that it shouldn't have happened and, yet it did. This has a direct impact on how you interpret the world. Your mindset begins to change, your confidence in what you see begins to diminish. And, little by little, you start to question whether reality is truly continuous, or if it is built in fragments, like a sequence that can fail, freeze, restart. Now think about it. What if these glitches aren't mistakes? What if they're small revelations? Moments when the structure of reality can't remain perfect and lets something else slip through. Something that isn't part of this version, but is still connected to it. Perhaps these bugs are signs that there's more happening at the same time. Other layers, other possibilities, other versions trying to coexist. And, for some reason, you're starting to notice these interferences. Not by chance, but because, somehow, you're more attentive, more sensitive to these distortions. And the more you notice, the more these patterns begin to repeat themselves, as if there were a logic behind the chaos, as if these glitches were clues, fragments of a hidden truth trying to emerge. And this raises an inevitable question. If reality can fail, then to what extent is it reliable? Now tell me, have you ever seen something that seemed to literally glitch in front of you? Comment below. I saw the glitch. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we get to the central paradox, everything starts to get even more uncomfortable, but also more revealing. It's not just about realizing that something is wrong with reality. It's about discovering that this error can be part of a larger system, perfectly organized precisely in its imperfection. A paradox where what should be impossible simply happens, yet maintains its own logic. Think about it. What if you met a future version of yourself who had already lived through this exact sequence of events? Not as a coincidence, but as confirmation that everything has already been experienced before, only in another layer of time. This version looks at you with a strange calmness, as if it already knows what you will feel, what you will choose, and even the exact moment when you will begin to doubt your own perception. This type of situation breaks any idea of linearity, because if the future already interacts with the present, then your journey isn't a line. It's a closed cycle, or perhaps something even more complex, like a structure where all decisions already exist simultaneously, just waiting to be accessed. And this completely changes how you understand impact, transformation, and even responsibility for your own choices. The most disturbing aspect of this paradox isn't the presence of this other version, but what it reveals. The feeling that you're not creating the path, but merely traversing something already designed on some invisible level of reality. And yet, within this system, there's a sense of freedom, as if each decision still carries weight, still generates real consequences, even though everything is somehow already written. This creates an internal conflict that's hard to ignore, because your mind wants to believe in total control, but at the same time begins to accept that there are forces, patterns, and structures that go beyond immediate comprehension. And it is at this point that the hidden truth begins to approach, not as an answer, but as a growing feeling that something is silently observing, organizing, and adjusting everything. And the more you try to understand this paradox, the more it seems to expand, as if it had no endpoint, only new layers of interpretation emerging with each attempt at explanation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what comes next begins to connect these pieces in a way that can completely change how you view this journey. Comment below. I understood the pause. Oh, now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when the unsettling discovery finally begins to reveal itself, it doesn't arrive as a clear answer, but as an accumulation of fragments that fit together uncomfortably. It's as if all the little flaws, all the glitches and paradoxes you've begun to notice are, in fact, parts of something much bigger. Something that has always been there, hidden in the background of reality. What if this world that shouldn't exist isn't a separate place, but a layer superimposed on our own, a kind of parallel structure that manifests itself in moments of instability, when human perception cannot sustain the illusion of perfect continuity? In this scenario, what we call error may simply be a leak between these layers, revealing a truth that normally remains hidden. This completely changes the mindset with which you view your own journey, because it stops being just about what you experience day to day, and starts being about what might be happening behind what you can perceive. Decisions that seem simple begin to carry a different weight, as if each choice opens small windows to alternative versions of the same reality, each with its own invisible impacts and consequences. And the most disturbing part of this discovery is that it offers no stability. On the contrary, the more you try to organize the pieces, the more they seem to move on their own, as if there were a silent intelligence adjusting everything to prevent a complete understanding from happening easily. This creates a constant feeling of psychological impact, as if reality were always one step ahead of your capacity for understanding. Perhaps the hidden truth isn't something that can be fully revealed, but something that only comes close, in flashes, in momentary ruptures of what you believe to be solid. And in those moments, everything seems to make sense for a second, before falling apart again. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when you start to connect these revelations with the patterns you've seen before, a new layer of this structure begins to form, and it can completely change how you understand this experience. Comment below. The truth has come out for me in the... Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when the breakdown of perception happens, it's not just the world that changes, it's you who begins to doubt the way you've always interpreted everything around you. It's as if the mind, for a moment, stops filtering reality and allows something raw to pass through consciousness. And what arrives is not comfort, it's doubt. At this point, what seems solid begins to lose consistency. Objects remain. People continue talking. The routine continues. But there is an invisible layer of strangeness, as if everything were slightly out of sync. Small delays in perception, thoughts that don't seem entirely your own, sensations that the environment responds almost consciously to your attention. This is no longer just about glitches or paradoxes. It's about the very structure of perception being questioned. And the most striking thing is that this shift doesn't happen dramatically. It seeps in. First as curiosity, then as unease, until it becomes a kind of different lens through which you begin to see everything. And when this lens activates, even the simplest things take on a new meaning. An empty street, a prolonged silence, a reflection that takes half a second longer to follow your movements. Everything begins to carry a symbolic weight that didn't exist before. This creates an internal transformation that is difficult to reverse, because the mind begins to operate on two levels simultaneously, that of routine and that of suspicion. And this duality completely changes your journey. You stop simply living in the moment and begin to analyze it in real time, as if you were searching for hidden patterns in every detail. And the more you search, the more reality seems to respond with new layers of complexity. Perhaps the truth is that perception has never been a neutral window, but an active system that shapes what can or cannot be seen. And if that system fails, even for an instant, what appears behind it may not be something that should be easily accessible. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when you begin to accept this disruption as part of the experience, something even stranger begins to emerge in the way. Time, space, and even your own decisions seem to rearrange themselves, as if there were an invisible backstage silently adjusting everything. Comment below. My perception changed her. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we reach the climax of this journey, everything that seemed merely strange begins to rearrange itself into a truth far more weighty than any initial theory. It's no longer about isolated glitches. It's no longer about loose paradoxes. It's about the possibility that this entire world, with all its rules, logic, and apparent continuity, simply shouldn't exist in the way it does. And when this idea takes hold, it doesn't arrive as a clear answer, but as a gradual collapse of certainty, as if all the mental structures that supported their perception began to lose stability. Time, which previously seemed broken into small fragments, now reveals itself as something even more unstable, almost artificial. Reality ceases to seem like a fixed scenario and begins to behave as something in constant reconstruction, silently adjusting details to maintain an appearance of normality. At this point, the transformation is no longer external. It happens within the way you interpret each moment. Simple decisions begin to carry an existential weight, as if each choice were being monitored by something beyond immediate comprehension. And the most unsettling thing is that, even in the face of this impact, everything continues to function. The world doesn't stop. It doesn't completely freeze. It simply adapts, as if it were always one step ahead of any attempt at total understanding. This creates a feeling that's difficult to describe, as if there were a hidden truth underpinning everything, but which is never fully revealed. Only fragments, incomplete revelations, behind the scenes, glimpses that appear through subtle flaws in perception. And the more you try to organize these fragments, the more they seem to reorganize themselves, as if the very structure of what you're trying to understand were alive. And perhaps the most unsettling point of all is precisely this: the possibility that there is no real error, only a version of reality that shouldn't be perceived that way, a system that functions perfectly within its own limits, but which, when observed closely, reveals enough inconsistencies to completely change your journey of understanding. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when this climax approaches consciousness, something begins to change not only in the world around you, but in the way you position yourself within it, as if reality begins to respond directly to the fact that it is being observed more attentively. Comment below. This world doesn't make sense. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we reach the open and reflective end of this journey, the feeling is not one of closure, but of expansion, as if everything seen so far is not a conclusion, but merely a point of observation within something much larger, still in motion. And perhaps that is the true impact of this experience, realizing that there is no clear end when it comes to reality, perception, and consciousness. In this state, the world that once seemed unstable begins to reveal a new layer of interpretation. There are no definitive answers, only possibilities that intersect, diverge, and meet again at different points in their journey. Time, which had already shown signs of disruption, now seems more like a reflection of the mind itself, trying to organize chaos into a comprehensible sequence. But the more you try to organize, the more you realize that order may be just a functional illusion, and this profoundly changes how you approach your decisions. Each choice ceases to be just an isolated event and becomes a point of connection within a much broader network of impact and consequence. As if, at some level, everything were interconnected by invisible backstage mechanisms that sustain the experience we call life. And these backstage mechanisms don't fully reveal themselves. They only suggest their existence through small signs, coincidences, and sensations that are difficult to ignore. What's most intriguing is that, even in the face of this uncertainty, there's a kind of continuity. You keep perceiving, interpreting, adjusting your mindset, as if you were constantly reconstructing the meaning of what is real. And perhaps that's the most important thing of all, not finding a final answer, but learning to deal with the constant transformation of one's own perception. Because when the world ceases to be something fixed and becomes a layered experience, each instant takes on a new weight. Every silence can hide a revelation. Every detail can carry an impact. And every moment can be part of a journey much larger than what is visible. And now, while all of this still echoes in your mind, there's that last, hard-to-ignore feeling that perhaps reality was never exactly as it seems. And the more you observe, the more it seems to respond back, as if it were aware of being perceived. Comment below, I saw beyond reality aid. And if you've made it this far, then this probably wasn't just another video for you, but one of those experiences that stays with you even after it's over. And that's precisely why it makes sense to continue this conversation in a more personal way. If this type of content, full of mystery, paradoxes, and reflections on reality, has made you see things differently, subscribe to the channel. Because here, the idea is not just to tell stories, but to explore these hidden layers of perception and everything that challenges what we believe to be real. And tell me something in the comments. Right, I'm with you until the end, if you've truly followed this journey this far. This helps to understand who is really immersed in these topics and creates a connection with those who also feel this curiosity about what exists beyond the obvious. If this video captivated you at any point, leave a like. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a sign that this type of deeper, more narrative exploration resonates with you and deserves to continue on this channel. And if you want to continue along this same line of thought, there's a video here that complements everything we've discussed today. It delves even deeper into these ideas and connects other points in this same journey. Click on it and continue with me there.